Welcome, everybody. My name's Emma Redding, and I have the privilege of serving as the current director of the Victorian College of the Arts. Nice to see everybody. A warm welcome to you all. Before I introduce our distinguished panel of speakers tonight, I'd like to invite you to join me in acknowledging that we are meeting this evening on the lands of the Boon Wurrung and Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their ancestors and elders, past, present, and those who are yet to come. And just remember that for thousands and thousands of generations, of course, people have been meeting on these lands where we are today, telling their stories, dancing their dances, and singing their songs, and we're certainly privileged to be doing the same. So tonight's a really special evening because tonight is the eve of the VCA's 50th anniversary. Its birthday is tomorrow, and I can't think of a better way of celebrating the eve by having this particular dialogue, because this dialogue is all about training the future artists. So what does it mean to train an artist for the future? And I can't think of a better group of people to have that dialogue with than VCA colleagues and people who care passionately about arts and education and about the VCA. So thank you very much for coming. I'd like to just start actually by a little icebreaker warm-up for the audience, and that is to ask you to just say hello to the person next to you and also finish this sentence, or at least think about how you might finish this sentence, which is, the art school of the future should. The art school of the future should. So just take literally 1 minute, speak to the person next to you, and think big. All right, minute's up. Great, hold those thoughts, and maybe you'd be willing to share some of those in a moment. But let me start by introducing this wonderful lineup of speakers. They represent sculpture, painting, curation, film and music, as well as research, artistic practice and education. Simone Slee is Associate Professor and Head of School of Art, the School of Art at the Victorian College of the Arts. She is a fantastic artist and academic who makes beautiful work that has its origins in sculpture. She produces installations, photographs, videos, and sculptural objects that often engage the body and have a performance potential. Her practice is a generative move away from concepts of function within the production and effect of an artwork. This has led to the surprising and unexpected functions and effects of objects or actions. At other times, the effects of absurdity, embarrassment, instability, and endurance have been generated through the artwork. Space, the private, public, and institutional, provide a field in which these sculptural gestures are often performed. Simone has exhibited nationally and internationally. She completed an artist in residence at Berlin Glassworks Studio representing Australia in the Australia Now in Germany Celebration of Culture in 2017, and has had many solo exhibitions. Her project On, a series of billboards, was showcased as one of the key visual arts program projects by curator Juliana Enberg in the 2003 Melbourne International Festival, and was concurrently included in the Orifice exhibition at the Australian Centre for Contemporary Art, ACA. Simone was awarded the Chancellor's Prize for Excellence for her PhD thesis in 2018. Welcome, Simone.
Thank you.
Tiriki Onus is a Yota Yota and Jaja Wurrung artist, performer, filmmaker, opera singer and academic who continues to practice his art and culture on the lands of the Boon Wurrung and Wurundjeri peoples. As the head of the Willins Centre, Deputy Dean Place and Associate Dean Indigenous at the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music, Tiriki works tirelessly and passionately for reclaiming and repatriating artistic practices back to country, as well as opening doors for others to engage with and celebrate the extraordinary stories of ingenuity and strength, which have been fostered within our communities for thousands of generations. The Willins Centre, celebrating its 20th birthday this year, is situated at the heart of the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music and Melbourne Arts Precinct, and fosters innovation in the research, development, advocacy and presentation of Indigenous arts and cultural practice. Tiriki is a wonderful colleague, so generous in spirit, and someone who we are all privileged to work with and learn from. Welcome, Tiriki. Sally Smart is one of Australia's significant contemporary artists with a practice that engages identity politics, ideas relating to the body, the home and history, recognised internationally for producing stunning, large-scale, richly coloured installations made from felt, canvas, silkscreen and everyday fabrics. Sally is a process-oriented artist who also works with dance, performance, video and fashion. She presents narratives that characteristically subvert gender hierarchies through deconstruction and reconstruction of historical events and political associations with the traditional activities of women. She was a board member of the National Association for the Visual Arts, a trustee at the National Gallery of Victoria, Australia, and was awarded an Australia Council Fellowship in 2014. Sally's works are held in major galleries in Australia and around the world. And Sally was a Vice-Chancellor's Professorial Fellow and Honorary Fellow at the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you.
And Siobhan Jackson, Siobhan's our little surprise guest for you later, in the form of a video that she has sent, is a senior lecturer, writer, director and researcher in film and television at the VCA and our wonderful Associate Director of Teaching and Learning. In the late 80s, she gained a Bachelor of Fine Arts Painting from RMIT and then went on to study here at the VCA, gaining a graduate diploma in painting in '94 and later completing a Master's in Film and Television Production. She completed a trilogy of short silent films, collectively entitled Killing Her Quietly, and her first feature film was a collaboration with Misha Bakker, You Can Say Vagina. She is currently completing her doctorate, devising a manifesto informed by notions and acts of social and cinematic refusal. Natalie King, OAM. Natalie is an arts leader, cultural producer and curator with over 2 decades of experience. She works across Australia, Asia, Pacific and Europe, across multiple domains, and her leadership spans the life cycle of artistic production and management from new commissions, exhibitions, artistic partnerships, stakeholder relations, fundraising and programming. Natalie is quite simply brilliant at putting people together, seeing connections that others may not see, and she cares deeply about fostering meaningful relationships. Currently, she is an enterprise professor here at the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music and was nominated by the Australian Financial Review 100 Women of Influence in 2018. She curated the first solo exhibition by an Aboriginal artist at the 57th Venice Biennale 2017 with Tracy Moffat, and more recently, she was a curator of the first Pacifica transgender and Indigenous artist Yuki Kihara for the New Zealand New Zealand Pavilion at the 59th Venice Biennale 2022. In the 2020 Queen's Birthday Honours, Natalie was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for services to contemporary visual arts. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you.
Told you we had a fantastic lineup of speakers. So to introduce our very important topic tonight, I always say that they're really important topics, but they really are, and this one really is. It's all about training the future artist. So what are the pathways of learning, research, and practice for emerging artists? How can the VCA remain globally relevant and acknowledge its context, its place, its history, and its future? How does the Art Institute continue to be an experimental environment for artists' education, artistic research, and theoretical reflection? I asked the panellists to consider the university as a site where speculation, curiosity, and failure are valued, where inspired learning and unlearning is fostered. I asked them to reflect on what a decolonised curriculum might comprise and think about collective learning, dismantling power structures of the solo professor, and the future of the lecture. Together, they imaginatively consider the core tenets of an arts curriculum where creativity is nurtured and the artist is nourished in times of seismic upheaval. Gosh, that's quite a tall order. And with all these dialogues, I don't prescribe in any way what colleagues are going to say. They can say what they want to that theme, really. I'm continually reminding myself, as the director here, of the immense responsibility and privilege we have as arts educators to continually ask, really, how does one train an artist? How do we create an environment that is optimal for student artists to learn from, with, and for the world? And of course, we're talking about equipping students to develop a practice and a process so that they can themselves build the track for their career, their journey, rather than just travel on a train. So they're not just passengers, they're not even just drivers, but they're building the tracks and charting the course. They have to develop the skills to chart their own journey because we don't really know where they're heading across their 30, 40-year career, during which time AI and technology will be operating much of our lives. Lawyers and doctors will probably disappear. Who knows what artists will be doing in a world where the jobs people will be doing don't currently exist? I've just got 4 things left to say about artist education, and they're very sort of specific in a way. The first is about young people. I think we're killing the creativity of young people, and I'm just really mindful of my son when he was a bit younger. He looked at a bin, a rubbish bin, and there was a man in the bin collecting things or trying to pick up some food from the bin. And he said, "Mummy, why is the bin eating the man?" And of course, that's the way he saw it. He saw the bin as eating the man. And I never saw it like that, of course. As an adult, we don't. And when my daughter said just the other day, "Mummy, I'd like to film my whole life, because then we don't need to worry about the history and trying to find things. Let's just film my whole life." And of course, I then sort of said, "Well, we haven't got the storage. There are technical constraints. You can't do that." And so, but she didn't know that what those constraints are. Both my children are neurodiverse, so they see the world in a particular way. But as we know, children's imaginations are incredible because they haven't learned and accepted the standard conventions that we all learn to accept as we grow up. So even though our business is tertiary education, it would be short-sighted of us not to play a role in understanding and supporting young people in the wider arts ecology. Being a child or a teenager is all about change, and it's when we make sense of the world. It's when we see things differently and imagine our futures. The second point I'd like to make is that no matter what the art form, and when we talk about the art school, I hope we're obviously not just talking about visual arts, but we're talking about performing arts too. No matter what the art form, though, we need to be more bodily. So my proposition is that, well, because I suppose political resistance exists to being back in our bodies have become weapons, actually, against each other in these last few years. Isn't one of the biggest problems that we've become disengaged from our bodies. So perhaps we have a responsibility to help develop embodied citizens as an art school. In a conversation at Sadler's Wells and Independent Dance in London, Dance, Intimacy and the Civic, there was talk of how body-based practices and relational practices can bring about social change, and how there might be a landscape whereby arts and health practitioners could work together, how poetic, artistic and clinical perspectives intertwine. The porosity between intimacy as care and kinship, and civic as organisational structures and order. The third quick one I have to say is just skilling and unskilling, a contradiction of terms. Learning, unlearning, passing, failing. We talk about this a lot in art and arts education. And of course, conceptual art attempted to de-skill as a way of democratising itself. Our website says art is the thing we all aspire to, but craft is the fuel we need to get there. VCA trains actors, directors, even music theatre performers. That's what it says on our website. And you leave with a degree if you work hard, but more importantly, you leave knowing your craft and the ability to turn it into art. So fundamentally, as we know, the artist needs to have something to say, and then they need the craft, the means by which to say it. Maybe we should just sit, therefore, with that slight discomfort of that sort of slightly paradoxical idea of needing deep studio practice and craft development alongside the unlearning, the creating, the conceptualizing. Maybe it's about shifting the discourse slightly from questions of skill to questions of knowledge. And then the last one I'd like to say is just something around the future. What on earth does our future look like? The University of Arts London announced the importance of creative education in response to the climate and ecological emergency. Professor Dilys Williams and Jeremy Till, Central St. Martin's, says, no future is normal, but our immediate future promises a rupture from the past. With no agreed sense of what is yet to come, we need to anticipate and imagine new futures, yet unthought of and unseen. It's exactly these projective acts of anticipation and imagination that underpin creative practice. So how do we move, though, from being more idealistic and philosophical to very practical and making change? We all know we need to decolonize the curriculum. There's no need to argue that anymore. But how do we do that, recognizing our own positionality and clouded view of what's needed, and knowing that to do this properly and permanently, it will probably take a generation? One thing we should not fail at, though, of course, is learning from our history. So let's imagine a future art school where the curriculum won't be written in a handbook. Maybe it's a manifesto or a proposition or a drawing or a photograph or a set of questions, where our spaces and resources are optimal for collaboration and dialogue, and our studios are designed more as a campsite than caves. So thanks, that's my little spiel, and I'm going to hand on to Simone. Thank you.
Emma, thank you. It's such a great delight to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation and to be here with you and you folk out there. Well, really, what an urgent time it is to be making art. As many of you will know, our Grad Show 2022 has just launched, where you'll see the myriad of voices and ways in which our young artists are engaging with the world. And Emma, I'm sorry, but I can't hope to cover all those fabulous points that you made. So this is just a very small stab at something that I think is really important to me about what we do at VCA Art. So I think for us at VCA Art, or particularly for me, what is essential is allowing art to lead us, where artists teach emerging artists in an... Oh, could I please have my slide? There we go. In an embedded studio context. From this basis, we build community and connectivity that sustains, critiques, questions, and supports. Allowing art to lead us. I know this sounds like an obvious thing to do in an art school, but it's never that simple. In a gallery or a museum, it can be complicated, just as it can be in a university. However, I thought for this talk I would start from my own perspective as an artist, and this will frame how I speak about what I hold close about what we do at VCA Art. Slide. In the last Director's Dialogue series, Stella said something that really actually resonated with me. He said that art happens somewhere between the artist's intention and idea and all the accidental chance encounters that occurs through art's making. For me, this process of making art from the initial artistic place of curiosity requires entering into the unknown. It requires taking conceptual and often paradigmatic risks, and with the quite real and rather horrifying possibility of failing. Deep in the process of making art, I need to hold my nerve. I really do not know where the work is going. It requires me to be attentive and watchful, to sense what is happening with the artwork's materials, and allowing them to speak back to me. My job as an artist is to listen to the questions the artwork proposes and follows where it needs to go. From this personal perspective, I will speak to what I feel is at stake in teaching art, teaching young artists at an art school. Artists teaching emerging artists, enabling a creative methodology for art to emerge. I'm so extremely lucky to work with esteemed and a diverse range of colleagues, all practicing artists, writers, thinkers, curators, from an emerging to a national and international context. These are both academics and our professional colleagues. I can't show you all the great colleagues that I work with, but you can just see some of the four heads of our undergraduate program here in the slide and in the room today. As a group, they bring their rich and diverse experience of making and experiencing art to model and guide this process in both our coursework and research programs. Together, the art students and graduate researchers bring where they have come from. They bring their past, their ancestry, their possible future, inklings of curiosity and artistic drive. This can also be their material. For graduate researchers, our artist colleagues anchor and facilitate how art in and of itself reveals the questions that drive our research and our new understandings. Which brings me to the next point, the importance of artists teaching emerging artists in an embedded studio environment. And I think this goes to your point, Emma, about an embodied physical experience. And of course, this is not new to my colleagues. It is in this studio environment that students develop their own process of art making. They ignite and test their ideas. For us, the studio, or for me, includes the place in which to make, dream, dawdle, play, to take risks, to fail, to extend the concentration that we have in contrast to the speed in which information comes to us in an instant on the phone. It also includes the workshops. The slide, please. The install spaces. It includes the disciplines, which could be sculpture, painting, photography, installation, drawing. Their medium could be the social, the body politic, place, the sonic, their father's ophthalmic rooms. It includes their friends. And then through the curriculum, additional parameters and inputs are generated by our artist lecturers and texts. New materials, new technologies, new ideas, old ideas, connections with artists and artworks locally and internationally. Ideas that bring the art canon, ideas that challenge the canon, ideas that bring new stories, differing epistemologies, the stories of this place, the unceded lands of the Bunurong, ideas that celebrate difference. Students engage with the art world locally and nationally, and these are things that are critical to continue. Next year, some students will travel in person to Costa Rica. Again, soon we'll have students travelling, and this comes from you, Tiriki, internationally, from First Nations countries in Australia. Students install work, reflect upon, to be discussed with peers and lecturers, wrestling where the core of the art belongs, how the work is operating and how artwork may be refined and concentrated and become more powerful. Somewhere in this rich world and the initial idea, the slippage will occur and art will emerge. The discursive and reflective space builds community and bonds between students that is essential to the pursuit of art. And it's been incredible that in the last, really only maybe the last 8 weeks, that the community, after the time that we have, has really begun to galvanise. We've had self-generated activities and groupings emerge. Fix has returned, a BIPOC collective and a new magazine emerged. These are the types of relationships that build and carry forth way after the students graduate. And from my personal perspective, this emergent pedagogical approach has a type of brilliance. The capability of our students to work in a dynamic and shifting space of creative uncertainty builds agility, responsiveness, and resilience. This skill set enables artists to be well suited for and to build the future world, which we know, as we all know, is replete with uncertainty. This emergent methodology embeds attentiveness to the shifting questions that we all need to ask. And the greater the diversity of artists who take part in making art, the broader the questions and the perspectives that will be produced. This will also produce a clearer view on the acknowledgement of the land and history from which we come in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Tiriki.
Beautifully said, Simone. Thank you. There's so much there that really speaks to me. And forgive me, I'm not organised enough to have prepared a PowerPoint, but I shall try to paint a picture with words. There's so much there that really speaks to me. Because so much of it is the meat of many of the conversations that we have, both with one another and more broadly with our students and as a community, increasingly. And a word that comes up for me again and again in this space is expectations. And the types of expectations that people have of ourselves, that we have of one another. I love Florence's comment that they'd like to film their entire life. I get that, totally. Not for myself, I don't think I'd particularly like to film my entire life, but as a filmmaker whose work kind of lives so much in archives and the opportunity to uncover histories it's such an incredibly powerful space. A few years ago I discovered a recording of my father giving a National Press Club address in about 1993 or 94 or something like that. And it was notable to me for two reasons. One, because he was saying a whole bunch of stuff that I thought were my original ideas. And I realised that, in fact, I was just inculcated with that stuff my entire life. But it also gave me a great sense of security, if somewhat lacking in originality. But the second point the second thing that stood out to me the most was the last 30 seconds of the recording where someone had forgotten to switch the microphone off. And I heard my father talking to someone next to him that was showing him where the glass of water was that he had missed, and here he is commenting to this person that he was so dry the whole time that he was talking, and it's amazing, it was right there, and how could he not see it? And it was amazing. I mean, my dad died in 96, I was 15 years old. That was the first time that I'd heard him truly himself. There were recordings of him being interviewed and on camera and giving great declamatory speeches and stuff, but the reality of him and that record and the importance that others are going to place on those. So the thing I love about Florence's recording is not necessarily even for Florence, but for those of us who want those stories later on. And there will be people that want them. It's just we have to play a long game across many generations. And I think that's this point about expectation that comes back to me again and again. And I'm really fortunate in the role that I have as the head of the Willens Centre, the Associate Dean Indigenous, the Deputy Dean Place here, that I get to have these conversations. I was also a student here 13, 14, maybe even 15 years ago now. I studied opera, which was not a place I had imagined I would find myself once upon a time, but there were extraordinary people there to work with. I see Maestro Cram in the audience. Hello, Maestro. You never forget your first conductor. But also, at the same time, I felt like I was an outsider. And it was not the fault of the people, the beautiful, wonderful people that worked with me, but there was a sense of us and them. There was the establishment, the institution, and then there was me. And for many of us as students, we sat on the outside of that. The institution was something to be railed against, to fight your way through, to exploit for what you could and make it out on the other side. But increasingly, the conversations that I have, the stories that I hear are not about that. Now there is a responsibility being asked of us as educators in this space to continue to educate ourselves. And perhaps sometimes the argument that, well, we've always done it that way is not necessarily sufficient an excuse anymore to continue doing it that way for always afterwards. That now, when young people come to us, not just young people, that's terribly ageist of me, when artists and those who are training with us come to us and say, well, what are you doing? We expect more of this institution to take a position, the point that you raise, Emma and Simone, about how we decolonise spaces, what loaded words like that actually mean, what the breadth of a practice that seeks to undo so much of the learning looks like. I don't think it's sufficient for us to make space anymore. Making space has always been a wonderful, noble thing, and don't get me wrong, it's great. It's not enough for us to turn around now to say to people, here is some space that I have made for you. I bestow it upon you with my largesse. Rather, now we're in a space where we're expected to amplify and be actively engaged, to show the meaning and the value for us in these spaces together, and talk about how we're going to continue to grow and to be live in that space and think about it again and again. When I used to think about the organisation as us and them, and I did, I thought that this was a place that expected me to assimilate. As a First Nations person coming here to study classical music, I was a different person outside these four walls than the one that I was in here. This was the great unassailable institution that I was going to exploit and weasel my way through and find my way out. 15 years later, I'm still here. And I like being here. There's that fantastic quote by Audre Lorde that says, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. And I agree with everything that they say, except in this point, because I think that oftentimes, well, depends how we define the tools. But institutions like this, I think, have oftentimes been the tools. Increasingly, I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the tool. It's about who wields that tool and how we wield that collectively. And the excitement for me is about having the conversations about how we wield these tools and how we make space is what keeps me coming back again and again to talk about that promise and how we amplify one another's voice. And perhaps for me, personally, selfishly, most importantly, what's in it for me and what I can learn in this space and how I can keep growing. Because then that's what my kids will pick up. And then hopefully they'll think it's their own original ideas like I did about everything my father was saying at National Press Club. And then I'll find a recording like this of me years and years and years later and realise that I had the idea first. But we can but hope. But that's me. Thank you.
That was wonderful. And actually, in so many ways, it touches on some of the things I've been thinking about in terms of this subject, because I'm talking at it from experience as an alumni of this institution, and also how incredible it was for me 30 years ago, and how transformative it was. But actually, what was the reality that really happened? I'll get some slides happening. It was, I did a postgraduate here and then I also went and after that, very quickly after that actually, I think I taught for a year and then I went back to study for the very first masters. I was in the very first cohort. But I've been reflecting on all of the experiences over this period of time, going back through this subject, thinking about what it was like as a young person at art school and what the art school and institution was doing then. Now, it was doing a lot of really brilliant things, but it was also doing a lot of sort of very problematic things as well, especially for a woman artist. And there were very, very strong paradigms about what an artist was. And of course, I didn't always see myself in that model. And as a lot of us didn't. It wasn't as brutal as it had been for a decade before, but it was fairly, the first thing you came into, and any of you who are students here may know the legends of this, and any of you who are my generation will know that that's what happened to you. You got told that only 1% of you will be an artist. And it's cruel and demoralising for people, right? So what do you do with that as a young person? You work incredibly hard to try and be the 1%. But at the same time, the model doesn't always fit. So through my 30 years, I've been thinking mainly about when I mentor young, and I haven't actually gone back into the institution to be a lecturer, actually, since I left. But I mentor artists because I'm an artist. And then I've come back to the institution and I find it a very different place and I love it. I love it now. I love and it's everything that you say. You spelled it out exactly what it is. It's so proactive for the student. It's not about this them and us. It's this, the pathways are much more brilliant. And I say to those that I come across in a mentoring capacity, your cohort and your lecturers are so important to you. And this university is yours to use. It wants to help you in every possible way. Use it. It's got amazing facilities. But you, as an individual, as a young person, the actual institution has to not just make them go and look for it, you have to set up, it's almost structural, and it's starting to change, it is structural. The change is where they don't always have to find it like I had to find it. It actually is much more apparent, it's more tacit. It's actually something that if you just talk to a couple of cohorts, you can find. But that said, There's still a lot of structural work that needs to be done, I believe. And some of that is around back to the body, the idea of the body. I do think there's, and I'm very interested, you can see from the images, and I'm not even talking to them, but you can see the background. I've started to work a lot more interdisciplinary, and I work a lot with actually people from this institution over the years. And one of the things that's really important to me is that building these communities and collectives and groups of individuals who are across generations as well and across disciplines. More interdisciplinary, I don't dance, but I work with dancers. But one of the incredible things that I love doing, and I've found incredible insight into my own work, failing and failing and then succeeding and failing, is that by having this intergenerational and interdisciplinary practice, I give instructions to the dancers that are so crazy, like that are completely outside of what my level of knowledge is, except they just rise to this incredibly poignant, beautiful, profound sort of works, because I'm giving them instructions that come from, in a way, some of my discipline, but also it makes me go outside of myself as well. It makes my borders and learnings unlearning as well. I find that really has been one of the greatest, I guess, gifts of this whole process. Along with that is also my work travelling and being a fairly, I guess you could call me a global artist in that sense, that I have spent my life in the last 30 years working across multiple countries, including Costa Rica, actually. And so I've sort of now at a place where I have many connections and contacts around this world. And I think what I love is to be able to give those back, because I believe in collective, I believe in collaboration, I believe in colleagues. Being collegiate is really important to me. There's so much information that I have that I want to share, and I think everyone has. And I think the institution, number one thing the institution should do and bring a really strong focus on, and it often gets lost a little bit, is alumni. They are your greatest gifts. I mean, they just, in a second, they leave the institution, but they are right there for you. And I just think that's an incredible pathway. Thank you.
Siobhan.
Hello everyone, Siobhan here. And hello Natalie, Simone, Sally, Tiriki and Emma, in whatever configuration you are around me. What company to be in. I assume if you're watching this that Emma will have told you who I am. So cheers Emma, and thank you for the intro. If nobody's watching and there's been no intros, well, I'm just sitting here all alone late at night talking to a machine, which is, need to say, a bit sad. But never mind. I take comfort in the fact that I am in beautiful Ngunnawal country, up Canberra way, which is why I can't be there with you tonight, which is regrettable. But in the precious few minutes that I do have your attention tonight, I'm going to try out an idea, which could be a total disaster. But I figure, given this evening's topic and the value our institution claims to place on notions such as speculation, curiosity, and the benefits of failure, it would be remiss of me not to have some skin in that game. So here goes, skin in. I'm in the very lucky position of being VCA's Associate Director of Learning and Teaching, which is a really great privilege. It feels particularly lucky for two probably quite obvious reasons, but one, I genuinely really love teaching, so tick. And two, I really also love learning, tick, tick. So finding out new stuff is good, and sharing things with other people is really important. Both genuinely wonderful and powerful things, and needless to say, fundamental tenets of what we are employed by the university to do. Yay. But the truth is, as an artist and as a teacher, my head is actually, my heart, head over heels in love with something else. Something less tangible, something slippery and kind of even maybe a bit treacherous. I'm in love with not knowing stuff. my failure in understanding, that for me is the real charm, and the tonic for long game creativity. And so my provocation for you all tonight is this: what if great creative arts education was to be found in employing bad teaching and bad learning, the prompting of an avalanche of not knowing, approaching teaching as a process of emptying brain tanks, embracing what helps one know less, marching towards hesitation, abandoning assured understandings, actively draining heads of clever thoughts and thinking, encouraging inaccuracy, misplacing knowledge so one has to strive to try and rediscover it, only perhaps to lose it again. Banning mastery, don't be the master. Make bad art, do bad acting, find what doesn't work. Break the good idea into 2 bits and feed the best half to your dog. Rub out the best drawing you've ever done. Delete the great scene, forget the line, be out of tune, be a really bad artist to be a great student. Leave your degree perhaps knowing less than you came understanding. Exit bewildered, annoyed, unsettled. Embrace the liberty of that uncertainty, the power in doubt, the wonder of hesitation, and I would again suggest refuse to be a master of your form. When I was a film student, a teacher saw me struggling to communicate with an actor, and they told me, if you don't know what you want, pretend you do. I did, as I was told, and the scene was rubbish. Bugger that, I say. Embrace what you don't know. Be honest about your failings and uncertainty. Actually embrace it. Don't just imagine it as a groovy learning and teaching tool for other people, kind of other artists, lesser artists, or other classrooms, the lesser classroom. We talk about it all the time. Failure is your friend, be vulnerable to it, but do we really mean it? Do we teach our students how to live with it, love it, and admit it, indisputably recognising its body odour? Or do we teach them to recognise it only from a safe distance, keeping failure safely packaged as conceptual or a kind of pedagogical plaything? What if we made failure the primary creative aim in the classroom and studio, explicit and active, not a state to manage on the way to somewhere better? What if we allowed failure to be that better place? I wonder what kind of success it might breed. Just a thought. I'm curious. That's all. And now you get to watch me be incredibly unsuccessful and fail to elegantly turn off my technology. Cheers. Have a good night.
I think there are some wild ideas percolating about not knowing who wields tools, how we might engage together, and looking at who's been here before, like alumni. Thank you, Emma, for inviting me to contribute to the finale Directors Dialogue series, Future Forward. I think it's through talking and listening and these kinds of dialogues that we can share and exchange knowledge as a pathway towards repair when the world, as we've all noticed and pointed out, is a mesmerising mess. And Emma, your empathetic and inclusive leadership has brought all of us together across our various domains, and we all appreciate it. I feel like somewhat of an outlier being the last one, and following on from luminaries with Simone, Tiriki, Sally and Siobhan, because I'm both inside the academy and outside working as a curator. For me, the VCA is nirvana, being in a very informal environment where really anything can happen. I work as a curator and I like to see myself as an accomplice, an ally, an enabler and a conduit to artists. For me, artists, and 3 of whom are up here at the moment, are guardians of the imagination, and they all help us to dream the world awake. Caring for artists and their work is at the core of my curatorial practice, whether it's thinking through ideas in formation, failed ideas, ideas that are unconventional, risky, or even dangerous. For me, care and trust are at the heart of all relationships, alignments, and solidarities. And one of the most urgent metaphors of the moment is that everything is interdependent and interconnected. Often I prefer to work with artists who might have been overlooked and not on the typical exhibition roster in museums, in an attempt to represent the interests and histories of those that might have been marginalised, sidelined, or oppressed. I like to look sideways beyond static museum presentation to relationships of care that are enduring and full of potential. So I'd like to turn now to 3 artists, if you could go back, who I've been working with over the past few years. And I've always had an affinity with artists whose work has urgency and currency, relevance and resonance. Artists take me to places, metaphorically and physically, that I hadn't imagined. I've curated the current Aotearoa New Zealand Pavilion at the Venice Biennale with Yuki Kihara on the left, who was the first Pacifica, Indigenous and Asian artist to be selected. I curated Tracy Moffat at the Venice Biennale in 2017, and she was the first solo presentation by an Aboriginal artist in the Australian Pavilion. And I work very closely with Destiny Deacon, and in fact, Siobhan Jackson and I worked together with Destiny in film and television over the past few weeks to make a new Super 8 film. So the VCA is full of possibilities. Next slide, please. Yuki Kihara's Paradise Camp shifts the optics towards a whawhawhine or transgender utopia from Oceania. And we've received inordinate attention in Time magazine, CNN, Financial Times and The Guardian, to name a few. The last day of the exhibition was on Sunday, and our audience attendance was 485,079. I've never worked on anything of this scale. Yuki pays attention to the world around her, highlighting the plight of the transgender community. She rescripts, reimagines and rehabilitates European art histories that have excluded perspectives from Polynesia and Oceania into a dazzling suite of photographs that audaciously repurpose Paul Gauguin with whawhawhine models. The quote on the screen shows how Yuki looks towards her own community and circumstances for inspiration. In particular, the whawhawhine annual beauty pageants with their gowns, crowns, prizes and laughter. Yuki has taught me to stay curious, read books, watch documentaries, listen to poetry. There is creative magic everywhere. Next slide, please. This is Tracy Moffat at the Venice Biennale, where she casts herself as a domestic in a mourning costume, seen from behind. She's in a desolate ruin, and this alludes to her own family's history of domestic servitude. She says, art making is not easy, and it does not appear overnight. It is a system of painstaking process beyond the artist's control. Artwork images decide when they are ready to emerge. The artist can only funnel them to a type of completion. Art is never, ever done. Tracy has taught me to be impervious to rejection and work hard. Hold on to who you are and where you are going. Next slide. Destiny Deacon's dolly lips remind us that you need to have something to say and a way to say it. There is a laugh and a tear in every photo. She uses laughter as a weapon to draw people into stories of dispossession and racism. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to turn to Louise Bourgeois' epic work for the 2000 opening of the Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern. She presents 3 9 to 4 metre tall steel towers and mirrors that look outwards and upwards. Visitors could climb the staircase to the platforms, which Bourgeois envisaged would become stages for intimate and revelatory encounters between strangers and friends alike. The huge mirrors reflect and bind the participant and the architecture, the viewing public and the towers. Louise Bourgeois has taught me to see yourself in others, Think big, whether in scale or ideas, and persist. And I love her phrase, I do, I undo, and I redo. It reminds us all to keep experimenting. Art is long and life is short. Love yourself and love what you do as much. Thank you.
Wow, gosh, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your words of wisdom and experiences and thoughts and ideas. Really generous of you, thank you. Just picking up on a couple of things that people have said, but there really feels like there's a sort of sense of hope in the conversation, which sort of surprised me. I wasn't sure we were going to get to that, but I love the way, Natalie, you were talking about Tracy speaking about art is never done, and our students went to Sydney, a couple of our students went to Sydney last week and met with Tilda Swinton, who was giving some words of wisdom around this. And she said, Tilda Swinton apparently said to our students that there was a validating reminder to all that striving to create is a life's work and not something that happens overnight. And apparently it was very reassuring when there was a question from a Ukrainian filmmaker about the value and morality of art making in a turbulent and fractious world, particularly moving. She said, the world needs art and it's what we are called to do. And I was wondering about this idea that maybe someone said to me once, every artist has really one proposition to say in life, but they spend their entire life just saying it in different ways. And I thought that was quite interesting. And Simone, I loved what you were talking about, how the students we provide the environment for the art to sort of seep through. And then, Tiriki, when you were talking about, I was really struck by what you said about it's not enough just to provide space anymore. That was really interesting. And then, Sally, picking up on what you were saying, how you love to be collegiate with colleagues in a collective, collaborative kind of way, and so it all just feels really hopeful. And I'm mindful that, Sally, that was just awful when you were told that only 1% of you would make it, and that kind of competitive spirit that is created as a result. Is it that now we have a much more cooperative environment? And Siobhan talking about how she was told to sort of pretend in a scene that she was creating, and that now it's not about pretending. So maybe we're encouraging this environment that's more cooperative, more authentic, and this idea that we can all learn and become artists. But that leads me on to this question around, well, what are the students sort of arguing against then, if they're not anti-institution anymore, and we've got this lovely nurturing space, what are they wrestling with? Is that a concern, I suppose? Is that something that you've thought about, that they, it's kind of their purpose to wrestle and be anti-institution? So I'm being a bit provocative.
Well, of course, they're still making art.
Yeah.
I mean, and that in itself sets up all sorts of propositions that they have to work with. I mean, it's just that's just the beginning, like there's so much that they can actually, and there's so much in terms of their personal politics or in the world and the sort of climate crisis that we're living in. And so there's so much that they can make their work about. It's just the very fact that I think if the institution can make these modelling where there is a place for the artist, and it's not 1%, or it's a place for the artist to be in that place, and there's still lots of work to be done in terms of how they're going to do it. That's what I would answer to that question, I think. There's lots to be done.
So what do you think, Simone?
Oh, look, I just think there's so much work to be done, and there's just so much for them to talk about. I mean, the great privilege of being at the art school is actually they teach us. They're the ones that are dragging us out of our preconceptions of things we thought were normal or natural, and they're the ones, I think in the last 5 years, in particular, and through what we've been in the last couple of years, Black Lives Matter, the really kind of powerful and genuine concern about how we renegotiate our place on this country, understanding the First Nation heritage that we have, and we've been so fortunate to be able to make art on the back of that. I just think there's so much in this space, so much about what is this binary world that we've assumed that in fact is being questioned through their very embodiment. Our students are really embodying the authenticity of what it means to be not in a binary body or set of thinking strategies. So I just think they're the ones, there's so much work to be done. I think they're really at the coalface of it, and we're learning. Like every day we'll learn something new from the students in that context.
And I think we can still rail against the institution, don't get me wrong. You know, love it. I think we can still rail against the institution, but perhaps there are more questions we ask ourselves in places like the VCA and the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music and the University of Melbourne more broadly about how we become the institution less. That do we have a role in railing against the structures that exist outside there that are involved? Because I think oftentimes we see the edifice, the building, the construct of the university as being part of the larger, as it still is, the larger colonial project which plays around on outsiders here. And there is an opportunity to start interrogating that and saying, well, what if we are not that? And I've just realised, just now as I've been sitting here listening to that and looking at the screen in front of me with the VCA 50 in it, I'm remembering back to the 40th anniversary of the VCA, where we had a party out in Dodd Street, and for the opening of this, I had to give an acknowledgement. I was off stage, there were dancers, and I had to do it in what was described as my booming God voice at the time. And for it, I wrote an acknowledgement of country, which was about the fact that we are here as artists in this place where song has been sung, dance has been danced, stories have been told and retold, and works have been painted for thousands and thousands of generations. And that's largely formed the core of a lot of the way that we acknowledge country within the faculty now. And it was only just now that, quite honestly, just now that I remembered that it was at the VCA 40 that I sat at the cafe and wrote that out quickly before I had to go on stage. But that artistic practice that existed here, vibrant and powerful for over 3,000 generations, existed without an institution to rail against as well. And then when we create those spaces in which we truly value our art as integral to our beings, something we literally cannot survive without, because I think that's true of our art, then we will keep making it, and it will keep being exciting. In fact, the more we can get the institution out of the way, perhaps the better art we'll ultimately end up making.
And if there's one change you think we should make as an art school, what would that be? I'm just thinking about Sally's comment about alumni. That was very specific, and I like that because it's really, really tangible, and I completely agree. I don't know, Natalie, what would you say? If there's one thing we should do to extend and enhance what we're doing, what would that be?
I think that we all need to be working inside and outside the institution so that we get perspective. I think many colleagues are very busy with everyday work, and it's really important to step outside the institution, whether it's going on country or going to Central Australia or going elsewhere or being within oneself. So I think being inside and outside the institution is, I think, it's vital for all creative practitioners.
It's a really good point, isn't it? And something that we encourage a lot. We encourage our students a lot to collaborate.
Yeah.
But rarely, even though we are all creatives in this space, rarely do we make space and time and opportunity to collaborate with one another, unless it is something that's led by a research project or that is directly linked to our teaching and learning. And perhaps at times we are a little bit hypocritical in that space as well, where we have that opportunity to invigorate and create those spaces as well.
I'm not in that space, but I can see that would be a really wonderful thing. You know, that, and also the intergenerational complexities in that are really important. And also, even, I think one of the other things that's really about that, then you start to get the modelling of what all these different types of artists there are in the world. as well, because they can see you, the students can see you in different ways as well, and you can fail too in front of them. I think that's also, you know, it's not about failure, is it? It's not really. It's more about you can be vulnerable perhaps, and sometimes that's the sort of to show those vulnerabilities to students is good. I think it's part of creative practice. You know, it really is. So. Yeah, it's quite the offshoots of that sort of negotiation of time and space would be pretty good.
Do you know what I think would be great, Emma?
Sorry.
I feel like I need a break, and I think we need a break from this kind of washing machine cycle of the 12-week semester. I feel like, wouldn't it be just great if we could just take off some of those, I know we need parameters. A good artwork always does come from parameter. Wouldn't it be great if we just dissolved the semesters and we just got rid of it and then we just did stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, and we just all went on holiday together. How many artists sorry, this is getting a bit wild. I did actually apply for a prize once and I came second, you know, the classic. And the prize for the artist was that they won a holiday in Poland. And I was so close. I just thought, wouldn't that be great? And okay, we do have to have a break from one another as well, but I do think something about letting go of the semester is great. The assessment, the semester, and there's that ongoing where you never quite be able to let go. To do those things, like to suddenly just go, let's take the year off and let's go bush and do something. That's a bit utopian, but I don't know.
I think definitely letting go of structure is really key. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Letting go of everything that is around boundaries and structure.
Yeah. Having said that, I also love it. Like, I love it. So I'm a contradiction. So I say that, and actually I love the structures. Like, I love the frame of the video. So I'm not, you know, at the same time I go, oh my God, that's too terrifying. But on the other hand, how do you get that boundary that works creatively to then... Sorry, if I just said the wrong thing.
Simone, you're the best. Keep going.
I know, I love it. And I'm happy that the Dean's here because we're all going to go on holiday now. And where should we go?
Where should we go?
No, I think there's something about structure, isn't there?
There's something about structure and bureaucracy and the rigidity of structure that is sometimes, I think, antithetical to creative practice. And, you know, we need to think differently about time. I like what you were saying, Simone, about being in the studio and slowing down time, taking time, time out. How can we do this in our feverish lives of deadlines and inboxes?
An assumption that artists need 3 years at an institution. Some might need 5, some might need 1. And we know that they're not done by the time they leave, but there's an assumption, isn't there, that the learning outcomes can be applied to everyone. It's 3 years, it's 12 weeks for a semester.
I went to an art school where actually you got to stay another year if you were good, not if you failed. And I just think that's a great idea.
I think that's really fascinating, and that's why I called the first slide that I didn't really talk to, but it came up and it said, I build my time, which is actually a quote out of a Schwitter's. Kurt Schwitter's is one of his poem philosophical discussions, and I've always loved it because it's like this sort of building of time. It is such a, I build my time as an artist, you know, what is that time, you know, and we know that time for artists is so important, so critical. And also, we also know that time can be an unusual thing with art, in terms of making art. Sometimes time can be compressed. It can be a very small amount of time. Sometimes it can be a really long amount of time to make work. And then there's a lifetime as well. So all of those things.
And then you can make it in a second and you go, what have I been doing all day? And then in a second at 6:45 or 9 o'clock, it happens.
Exactly.
It is the strangest thing.
It is
time. And making art.
Yeah, making art. It's so connected. An institution then breaks that, you know, so often breaks the cycle of what's going on because you've got to get to a class this is a structure that I guess an institution has to run by somehow, programming. I
Of
don't know.
course it does, yeah.
Well,
But not under Simone's.
It's a holiday. No, but actually,
Holiday
I think it's
call.
email. Email is like one of the... We could just get rid of some emails.
Ditch the emails, you think?
Sorry?
Ditch the emails, you think? Yeah.
No, but I think what Natalie's, I think you're all starting to talk about that optimal pace at which an artist works, and it's different for every single artist. So who are we to sort of decide in a way what that structure should be when everyone has their own pace at which they think and create?
And methodologies. Someone like Yuki Kihara doesn't have a studio.
Right.
She works like a cinematographer, so she works with a location scout, editors, costume, hair and makeup, and it's done within a short period of time, but the gestation is very long. So the Venice Biennale work was gestating for 5 years, but the actual photo shoot was in Samoa, and luckily I was able to attend for just over a week. So there are different cycles of time too that are beyond clock time and incremental time. But I'm curious to know what Tiriki says about time.
Well, it's a very funny thing, isn't it? Because it's that idea. I think I kind of got brought up with this idea of thinking about time in very, very long terms, in intergenerational time almost. I talked about this at the first Director's Dialogue series that we had as well, that a lot of my practice now started with a specific story that I'm working with that I know of 3 generations ago. It was a story that my grandfather told my father, who my father told me, and then it took me 30-something odd years to kind of pick up on it. And that's with some of the work I've been doing with trying to reclaim the technologies and practices of the big and the possum skin cloak. But this idea of time and space, I think, is so really, because sometimes things need to sit. I know I'd be rubbish at art school as a visual. I mean, I have a professional practice as a visual artist, but I'd be rubbish at art school because I need kind of 3 days in the studio to wander around and like get all my brushes lined up and to procrastinate before I can actually make something.
Be right at home.
But if you take me out for a lecture or something like that, then I'm rubbish. You know.
That sounds about right.
But if I go to a lecture, I feel like I'm doing something. I need the shame and the recrimination to make me finally do the thing.
There we go. What's Tiriki done today? Oh, yes, he's moved that paintbrush. It's going well.
Yeah, I always say to myself personally, I'm walking towards something, and I keep walking around it, and I know I'm doing all these other things, but the back of my mind, I literally put it physically back there, even though it's not back there. But it's almost like this idea that and it might be at 7 o'clock, yes, I'm ready to start now. It's, you think I'd be more disciplined after 30 odd years?
I'm happy to hear that, Sally.
But no, some things, I'll be doing other things, but I know that I'm actually walking towards something else. And that may take a long time to unfold.
And as you say, you might be walking around.
Yeah, and I literally, sometimes
other.
I do need walking. I mean, these are the paths that we have, physical paths to just put things, there are all of these. It was funny, I was thinking, just slightly changing off time, but looking at Tracy's film when we came in, that was so brilliant. And I was thinking, there's a little bit of truth in all of those, all those aspects of the artist. They are all, whether they are representations, cultural. Yes, I mean, I'm sure I've been through lots of all of them, in some way or another, which is, that sort of little thing of, what does an artist really look like? What is an artist? And we know that's so complex because there's so many types of artists.
It took me a long time to be willing to use the A word.
Yeah, some people say that. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because in the UK, artistic practice isn't used as much as a term. Creative practice is used. And I came here and I heard the word art and artists much more than creative practitioners or creative practice. I don't know why.
Yeah, why is that?
Yeah, there's MAs in creative practice much more than artistic practice. Yeah.
Do you think it's got to do with the gig economy? Sounds like I know what I'm talking about, but...
Maybe.
But
talking
taking
of
the
time,
art out, are they? I mean, art out of...
No, they're still doing I think they think it can be more interdisciplinary if they talk about creative practice.
Yes, I think
not
that's
just working with
probably-
arts. Yeah. Talking of time, I'd like to just involve the audience a little bit because there might be some burning questions for the panel or for each other. You might reflect on what you were speaking about at the very beginning when I asked you to consider what the future art school should look like, and you might want to just share what you said. But are there any questions or comments before I invite you for a drink and we finish off? Yes, thanks.
I feel like there were two, they feel binary, but they might not be. Hopefully you can explain to me. So I think it might have been Simone was talking about craft. Or was it Emma? No. Somebody right at the beginning said this is a place you learn, or
our website. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. The website says, yeah, you learn your craft here and then you go out and make your art. And then we had Siobhan talking about the whole doing the bad art and doing the mistakes and stuff. And my first part of my question is, how do you do both? Because I think there's truth in both. And then really Siobhan's not here, so I can't really ask the second part, which is, as a student, when you're learning, and I've been here twice at that capacity, the most terrifying thing is no boundaries and no rules and just fail away kind of thing, because you're always got that end where you're going to be out there in the world kind of thing. But Siobhan's not here, so don't. But yeah, the contradiction of the
skilling and the unskilling, or the
yes.
craft and the concept. Yeah. Sorry, no, thank you.
Can I just speak to that a little bit? That your comment that out in the world, and I'm really interested in that. Because I think that's where it's what you're saying is the meaningful part of that. I think is about this notion of being out in the world. And out in the world equipped with what? No skills, no craft, nothing, and a whole lot of imagination. Well, that would be fine. That would be fabulous. But I think what you're saying is, when I go out in the world, I do want something with me. But what I'm also proposing, and I think in how I was sort of thinking about it, maybe I had maybe 15 more minutes, I might have got to the point, but slightly didn't, is that the art school should equip you through your cohort and through your professors and lecturers and visiting artists, should prepare you, put the art to one side a little bit, but that should prepare you and for the outside world. That's what I really think is important. And then I think when you're making your work, that you will fail, and you will be triumphant too, probably by the end, or you'll get to a point, because you will have got to that point, and you will gradually come to all those. And I think a great art school eventually, you walk towards it, you do, and that people will help you achieve it. You will, and you will come away skilled in what you need to know to be in the world. That's what a great art school does. Don't you think?
That? Yeah, and actually I think it's exactly those things as you say, and I think what I was trying to talk about in the talk, it's an understanding an emergent methodology of making is what I'm kind of talking to, whereby you may not know how to get to the end point, but you know the right questions to ask along the way. You might decide that you need to make a film, but you've never made a film. So who do you ask? What are the questions? You might decide to make like a pavlova out of 70 eggs. So, and that might be the artwork. You decide who you know who it is that you'll go to for advice to get that support. And then you think, well, I thought I was going to make a pavlova, but it turns out it's going to be this other thing as the process emerges. So I think that attentiveness and listening to the ideas, learning to ask the questions, these are kind of core skill set that you can take into any context and actually allow you to think out of the box, to be able to problem solve, to be able to see it from another direction where others can't see. So I think they're really critical skills. Weirdly, I've been doing this coaching course because I'm in this leadership role, and they were talking about this amazing, well, not amazing, this method of this strategy, which actually strangely came out of the military, called VUAC, and it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And in the world today, we have exactly those complex set of circumstances where you need to be able to understand that the situation is complex and nuanced. You need to understand that it's volatile, that things might change, that you need to understand that there's uncertainty, and also that there may be an ambiguous outcome. But actually, by experimenting on different kind of fronts, you will then find the skill sets that will then emerge to you in the process. Does that make sense? So that kind of logic, I think, is something you deeply learn at art school. You become an entrepreneur in some kind of ways.
Thanks, Simone. Just thinking about the time, we're running out of time, but why don't we take maybe 2 or 3 questions in a row and then finish off with the panel commenting? Thank you. So, great. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. What is the VCA doing currently as part of a great continuum, starting at early childhood learning through primary school, through secondary school, and then on to further things?
Thank you for that comment. We'll answer that in a second. Just maybe 2 more questions.
Mine's just following on from what Simone was saying about, abolishing the semesters. I guess I was thinking more about another way to possibly think about it is maybe to get rid of the marking, and we have pass, fail, just whether that would open things up and is it possible? That's all.
Nice, thank you. One more question? Yeah, just to make sure people get heard.
Yeah, I would love to know what you've observed in the last sort of 20 to 30 years about how pedagogies themselves have evolved and adapted, and the old mode of the teachers at the front, the students all sitting down, the teachers are master, the students are learning. How do you see the pedagogies evolving in peer-to-peer learning?
Great questions, thank you. Yeah, I think some of the panel have spoken a bit to that, the idea that it's less hierarchical and that the colleagues are feeling like they're learning from students as much as they're teaching, they're learning. And I think any good teacher is a good learner. We've got that question. We've also got a question on outreach and schools, which maybe you can't answer, but I could maybe have a go at that one. And then the pass-fail. Anybody want to tackle any of those?
If I may, very quickly.
We've got probably just 2 minutes.
I know, I'll be... Emma knows me. I think it's really interesting because, particularly with the final point, and we talk about changing pedagogically, and also speaks to the question of the fear of being there in a space of being allowed to fail gloriously, but we don't necessarily always do it together. And I think pedagogically that's starting to change more and more as we see the need for us to inhabit spaces as students and teachers together. And it's the point that you make, Emma, about breaking down these walls somewhat more. But I love the provocation that Siobhan gives, and for me the really key aspect of that is about working collectively together in a space. We can make safe spaces where we can do that work. Is that oftentimes I think for us, when we're students, when we put out there and talk, all right, now go, fail, have a wonderful time, learn great things, it also feels, it's not so much the failure for me, it's the loneliness of doing that as well. And I think that also speaks to some of the pedagogy and indeed the way that we approach our work as a community. And I think there's more of that community that is being demanded from the pedagogy, but also which we feel ourselves.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that, the idea of Siobhan's provocation? Yes, it's coming from a point of view to say to fail, but that's painful as well, and it does need to be safe. And it's a point of, it comes from a position of privilege, really.
It does.
And so I was you know, it was a really wonderful presentation and provocation, but I just wanted to make that point that, you know, and also a point of privilege for someone, even like myself, who's been working and able to work as an artist. And it's all very well to say, go fail, go experiment. But this is why I think that maybe it is important for them to see people around them who are in positions of authority also doing that. And I think we discussed that would be a good idea on that week and year off.
Yes.
That's every year though, right?
No, I would get bored, actually. Then I'd, yes.
Get you a studio full of stuff, you'll be fine.
Just conscious of the time, I think to the pass-fail comment, we have that discussion a lot, and it's ongoing. And I think, yes, I'd even go so far as saying if we could reward growth over benchmark kind of learning outcomes, if we could somehow assess and reward growth. So wherever people arrive, that's where they're at, and let's see where they go, and that's what we're valuing. And then the comment about the outreach and the schools, the short answer is not enough. We're not doing enough. The longer answer is around funding and the fact that, you know, we are set up, we receive funding for tertiary education. However, that's not to say we don't have a responsibility to absolutely nurture the next generation of students coming through. So we need to do more in that space. But thank you for that question. I'd like to just say a few thank yous because it's our fourth and final talk in the series. First of all, I'd like to invite you afterwards to, if you'd like to stay around just for one drink, at the old police hospital, which is the building adjacent to this dance building. I'd like to thank Tracy, first of all, because she's been so amazing at helping put the talks together. Thank you. She's amazing in every sense. And I'd like to thank Carol Brown for really allowing us to have this beautiful space and you know, changing the timetable around slightly for us to do that. So thank you to Carol. I'd like to thank also our amazing marketing and communications and engagement and partnership teams for helping advertise the talks and helping put them together. So thank you to them, and our amazing production team and film crew. You are incredible, and all that stuff behind the scenes. There's so many of them to thank, and thank you Millie and her team. And of course, thank you to the amazing speakers. Thank you for keeping to time, brilliant, and for being, just sharing such incredible words that I think will stay with us, and they've really resonated for us. So I really am so grateful for you coming and sharing this final talk. It's all going to be online on YouTube. And please enjoy a drink with us over in the other building. Thank you. Thank you.